today we're going to talk about factoring out quadratic expressions. So this lesson is called on Study Island Equal and Quadratic Expressions. That is because when we factor them out, when we simplify them, they are still going to be equivalent to the original expression. So there are some common ways of factoring out expressions. If you have done the IXLs so far, the last IXL assignment, yesterday's IXL, was about factoring out expressions using kind of special cases such as difference of two squares, common factors, or perfect square trinomials, trial and error methods, all those. So in here we are going to kind of dive a little deeper. It's because the formulas are going to be given. I'm going to do the same thing as I did on IXL. So bear with me, because many of the algebraic concepts are based on this standard, which is A Algebra SSE 2. So that is the standard that we are covering, which is kind of about simplifying the given quadratic expressions. Okay, so factor the quadratic below, or simplify the quadratic expression below. So the first thing that we do is we look at the numbers and the variables and find a common factor. So I can divide, look at the numbers. One of them is 24, the other number is 8. What's the greatest number that you can divide both of these numbers by? I can divide 24 and 8 by 8. I can also divide them by 2 or 4, but this is the greatest one. Okay, that's why I picked that number. And then look at the variables you have. We have x squared and x. If you watched my IXL video from yesterday, or if you did that assignment on your own without any help, that means you already know that the greatest common factor of these two is going to be just x. Pick the smaller one if you're dealing with the variables. So when you combine these two, the greatest common factor of these two is going to be the product of 8 and x. And remember, product means multiplication. So it's just 8x. That's the thing, that's the term that I am going to factor out of these two. So let's get started. If I take out 8x from 24, x squared, divide the numbers. That's what factoring out means. Divide the original term by what you're taking out. 24 divided by 8, because those are the like terms, is 3. X squared divided by x. Let me write it on the side. X squared divided by x. This was from last week's IXL, dividing exponentials. When you have the same base, you keep the base the same. Subtract the exponents. That's x to the second power and to the first power. 2 minus 1 is just 1, which just means x. You don't need to do it step by step. If you know that it is x, you can just put it in there. By the way, you should know that it is just x by now. And then my second term is 8x. Let's just do the second one up here. 8x. And then I am taking out 8x. The first one is that right here. The second one is the thing that I am taking out. They will cancel each other out. The answer is 1, because when you divide a term by itself, the answer is 1. So that is going to be, my second term is going to be 1. What's the sign in between them? That's going to be this right here, minus. So that would be my answer for this question. If you look at Study Island's solution, it does it step by step. Instead of taking the 8x out, they just factor the x first, and then they factor the 8 first, I guess, and then they factor x. They did something like that. Yeah, they did it step by step. So let's just check the next question out. Now, I mentioned this on yesterday's IXL, difference of two squares. When you have two perfect squares, and if you're subtracting them, you can simplify it, factor it out. So the formula is given right here. on the IXL's video, I used lowercase letters. That doesn't matter. I'm gonna still use lowercase letters. So if you have a plus b, let's start from there because that's usually what you're gonna end up with. If you have a squared minus b squared, make sure both of the terms are squared. If that's your case, whatever you have in the base, you add and subtract them. These are my bases. I'll add them, I'll subtract them, and then multiply the factors together. Okay, that's how we expand it. Right here, I have 4x squared, 49. 4 is a perfect square, 49 is a perfect square, but what I need is 4x squared to be a perfect square, that whole thing, not just the 4. And this is a perfect square too. The way I can write it as a square of another expression, this is what I need. And then the sign between is minus, and then I need another thing. When I square it, it must be 49. That's what I'm looking for. What square gives you 49? I really hope that you know that it is 7, because you should, since you're a high school student, you should know that it is 7 squared. If not, you will grab a calculator and start multiplying numbers. 5 times 5, 6 times 6, 7 times 7, and then you will stop there because that's going to be 49. And then now we are thinking about what times itself gives you, like when you multiply something by itself, you want it to be that expression, 4x squared. So if you have 2x in here and 2x in here, 2 times 2 is going to give you 4. That's 2 times 2. And then x times x is going to give you x squared. So basically the base is going to be 2x. And then we will square that, because 2x squared gives you that right here, 4x squared. Now, this is the difference of squares, difference of two squares. And all you have to do, once you have a base squared minus another base squared, pick your bases, 2x and 7, right? Add them, subtract them, multiply them. That's how you break it down, if you have difference of two squares. And on the blue ribbon assignment for today, you are going to have questions about this one and the first one and the next one. You're going to have all of them. Okay, perfect square trinomial. Let's talk about this one. So, since they already have the trial and error method, I'm going to use the formula for example 3 that is given. But personally, I would like to use the trial and error method for anything that has 3 terms, because I don't need to memorize these formulas. But to be honest, these are pretty common formulas that you kind of need to know, especially if you're planning on going to college. Okay, so the 2 formulas that I want to introduce you, let's see, a plus b squared. If you have 2 terms added together within a parentheses and then squared, you can expand it like a squared plus multiply the bases, it's ab, and then multiply this by 2. 2 times ab plus the second term squared. Or it could also be a minus b squared. In that case, the first and last term stays the same, a squared plus b squared. The middle term takes the sign of this one, minus 2ab. That's multiplication again. That's product of 2a and b. Those are the formulas. Right here, if my question is, do you know if 18 is a perfect square? Like, are there any numbers that you can multiply by itself and end up with 18? No. If you do 4 times 4, you get 16. If you do 5 times 5, you get 25. Anything between 16 and 25 are not perfect squares. So, if this is not a perfect square, does that mean this is not a perfect square trinomial? No. Because if you divide that 18 by 2, it gives you 9. That's 3 squared. If you divide this 50 by 2, that's 25, which is 5 squared. So these are the things that you gotta kind of try to catch. So once I realize that if I divide all these by 2, which means factor the 2 out, and then 18 becomes 9 because 18 over 2 is 9. Keep the rest the same. I mean x squared, not the rest of the whole thing. So 60 divided by 2 gives you 30. That's your new number in the middle. Keep the x plus 50 over 2 is 25. Now I factored the 2 out of these three terms because they are all divisible by 3. They are all divisible by 2. Now this right here is 3x and then square the whole thing. This right here is 5 squared, right? And then I have the parentheses around here. Let's just bring them down as brackets. And then in front of everything I have that 2. Let's play with the middle term. If I can get 30x by multiplying these two and then multiplying that thing by 2 because of this right here or that right here or that right here, then that means I have my formula. Now let's see if I can write it this way. The first bit 2 times, but I'm not exactly sure whether I can do it or not, even though I should be. Let's just use another color. 2 times 3x times 5. And then that should be plus. Let's just simplify this, okay, and see if it equals to 30x. If it is, then my answer is going to be easier. 2 times 3 is 6 times 5 is 30 times x. The sign in front of them is plus. So I ended up with my middle term by using the bases that I have over here and here. Now since they match, these are my bases. The signs are all plus. This is the formula that I'm going to use. What I have is the right side, and I can kind of make it look nicer and neater if I put it in that form. Add the bases together. That's what that tells me. I'm working with in the brackets right now. The first base is 3x. The second base is 5. Add them together right here. And then square that parentheses or brackets, whatever you want to put, times 2. That would be my answer. Again, instead of brackets, you can use parentheses as well. And look at that right here. It's the same. This is when you use the formula. So let me show you quickly how you can use the other method, the trial and error method, once you take out the 2 out of these 3. So it becomes 2 times 9x squared plus 30x plus 25. The first step is the same. Now what I want to do is 3x times 3x, 5 times 5. I am breaking it down. Again, you need to watch yesterday's video to get familiar with what I'm doing right now. That was your IXL homework from yesterday. And then I do cross multiplication to see if I can end up with the term in the middle. 3x times, these are positive, because I want to end up with positive 25. I could also use negative 5, negative 5. When I multiply two negatives, they'll become positive anyways. But let's first test out the positives, okay? Instead of testing out a negative number. Okay, now 3x times 15, 3x times positive 5 gives me positive 15x. And then 3x times positive 5 gives me another positive 15x. If I combine these two, it gives me positive 30x, which is my middle term, which is what I'm trying to end up with. Okay, by doing this, I'm trying to end up with the middle term. If I do what I pair up the first line like this, and then put them next to each other as my final answer. 3x and plus 5 sits next to each other, and then put your second line together. 3x plus 5. These are the factors, and then factors are multiplied together to give you your original expression. But in front of all of these, right here, I'm going to erase what I'm about to do in a moment. This right here, the whole process is about what we have in the parentheses, 9x squared plus 30x plus 25. That's the simplified version of that whole parentheses. But outside of that whole thing, I have this 2, so I need to bring it down. So it is 2 times. Now, you may be asking, what is the difference because this right here looks longer than this right here. So what happens when we have a term multiplied by itself? We kind of raise it to the second power. 3x plus 5 is multiplied by exactly itself. So I take that 3x plus 5 and then raise its power to the second, and then keep that times 2 in front of everything. So the answer is still going to be the same. The method is different. You pick whichever method works best for you. Stick to it, because you're going to want to remember how to do these steps. And if you keep switching back and forth between the methods, probably you're not going to learn enough about either one of them. Okay, the last method, I guess. No, there's one more. Oh, it's the same method, but we have two questions. Factor the quadratic below. What I want to do in here, first, see if you can factor out a number. Okay, that should be your first step when you have three terms, so that you can see if you can make it look like that question. So 2, I can divide it by 2. 4, I can divide this by 2, but what about 9? I cannot divide that by 2, so there is no number that I can divide each one of these by, which tells me that I need to start doing trial and error. Okay, now let's get started. 2 times x squared. So when I break this down, it is 2x times 1x. Multiply the numbers. 2 times 1 gives you this 2. X times x gives you x squared. The 4, what comes to my mind is, even though I know this is going to be wrong, this is usually everyone's instinct. 4 is 2 times 2. It's going to be wrong. But the method is called trial and error, so I want to see what kind of process you might go through so that you understand that it is okay. This is the name of the method, trial and error. So if you're trying a lot and not able to find the right answer, it's because you're not trying a lot. You need to try hard enough to find the right answer. You may not like it, but that's the process. As you go, you're going to become better at this, so you will see what numbers to pick. Okay, so what I am trying to end up with, when I do cross multiplication, I need to end up with the number in the middle. Okay, so 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2. The numbers that I have is 4 and 2. Don't focus on their signs right now, because there's no way that I can end up with 9 by adding or subtracting these two numbers. The numbers are not big enough. So I know that this is wrong. I knew that this was going to be wrong because I was able to look at, as I was setting it up as 2 and 2, I knew that this gives me 4, that gives me 2. They're not big enough for me to have a 9. Okay, so I'm not going to use these numbers. Let's try 4 and 1. I see that this is going to be wrong, but I want to show you again what kind of mistakes you can make. When I do cross multiplication here, that gives me 2, right? Multiply, just focus on the numbers for now. And this gives me 4. When you add, it's 6. When you subtract these numbers, it's kind of 2 or negative 2, depending on which number you put first. So even if you add or subtract, you cannot end up with 9. So there's no point of us trying to figure out what the signs are going to be, because no matter what they are, they're not going to give me a 9. So let's just switch these numbers. Instead of 4, 1, I want to try 1 and 4. 4 times 2, when I do cross multiplication, that gives me 8. And this 1 times 1 gives me 1. So if I add these numbers, I can get a 9, right? If they're both positive, if I'm adding them, I'm good. So when I multiply these two, 1 and 4, I want to end up with positive 4. That means both of my numbers either positive or negative. But I know that they are going to be positive because my sum, the sum should be positive 9. When I add them together, I want to end up with a positive number, so both of them should be positive. If I make them negative, the sum is going to be negative. Okay, now let's double check our work. 2x times positive 4, it's 8x, and it's positive 8x. 1x times positive 1 is positive 1x. Combine them together, it's positive 9x, which is the middle term. So I set my numbers up, after like 3 attempts, I guess. Now that I know that these numbers are working fine, I can set my first line up together like this, put them next to each other, 2x plus 1, and then put your second line together, 1x or just an x, and then plus 4. So right here is our answer. Right here is Study Island's answer. You can switch them around. It's like 3 times 2 and 2 times 3. That doesn't change anything. So this method is a little different, but looking at that work, it's up to you. Whichever one, I don't know what method you want to follow, but this method is not even showing any pairs that is wrong as we did. I tried to find, like, show you 2 or 3 wrong ways of setting it up, because I know you're going to end up with those ways. So just so you know, it is totally fine. It's not like you're dumb or anything. It's the method is called trial and error. So you gotta have enough practice so that you know what numbers to pick quickly. Okay? So at first this is gonna be a torture. If you do it by hand, over time you will get better at it. And once you figure out how to do these, it's gonna make you feel great. You're gonna feel smart, and then you're gonna like it. If you do it by hand and solve these questions to the point that you know how to solve them. Okay, example 5. Again, this is trial and error. When you have trial and error, or when you have 3 terms in a quadratic, the first thing that you need to look for is a common number that you can divide everything by. So in here, 0.4, 4.4, 11.2, they are all negative. So I would try to divide all of them by this first number. Okay? If I can do that, the question is going to get in the simplest form that it can get. So I went ahead and then divided all these negative numbers by that 0.4, because it's the smallest number out of the 3. That's why you got to try to divide them by the smallest. You cannot divide it by 4.4. Okay, over here, use this calculator, desmos.com/calculator. Negative 0.4 divided by itself, which is negative 0.4. I know that almost every single one of you, even if you want to divide it by a number, you're going to try to divide it by 0.4 instead of negative. Don't forget about that negative. You want your first number to be a positive number. And in order to end up with a positive, you need to get rid of the negative by dividing by another negative number. So the numbers are going to become 1, positive 11, and 28. We are going to keep the variables the same. If you want to, you can pause the video and look at the divisions to see what is going on in there. 1, 11, and 28 are my numbers. 1, 11, and 28. Let's just fill out the variable parts. So before that, I took out negative 0.4, remember? And then it is times 1 x squared, 11x, and then the last one is just going to be a number. 1x squared plus 11x plus 28. And I don't want to have that 1 in here because that doesn't look good enough. So this is what I have. Okay, now right here I have a trinomial. By doing trial and error, I can see what the solution is going to be. If you have enough practice, this is what happens. When you look at it, you see if you can break it down, because there are going to be questions that you're not going to be able to break down. Not until you take Algebra 2. Okay, here x can be broken down as x times x, and this right here is 7 and 4. 7 times 4 is 28, and I know if I add these two numbers, it gives me 11, so I think these are my numbers. So the product of these two numbers that I picked should be positive 28. So I either need positive 7 times positive 4 or -7 times -4, because both of these are going to give me a positive 28. I can use either one of them. But if I pick this right here, if I pick this one over here, -7 and -4, what happens when you add those two together? It gives you -11, not a positive 11. You need a positive 11, okay? So what we do then is pick the positive 7, pick the positive 4. Now let's do cross multiplication to see if it actually works. That's kind of like outlining my thought process, but I want to see if they are going to work. X times positive 4 is positive 4x, and then x times positive 7, I'm doing cross multiplication, is positive 7x. Combine them together, they give you positive 11x, which is what I have in the middle. So that means I set everything up correctly. I can just take my first line, put it together. First line goes together, x plus 7, and then second line goes together, x plus 4. And then remember, outside of this parentheses, because all I am doing in here is simplifying what I have in the parentheses. Outside of it, my bad, let me take this out of the way. Outside of the parentheses, we have negative 0.4. Negative 0.4. So, which is, I think, the same as right here. I think, is that all? I think there's another part of this video. I thought this was all. Okay, I'm glad that there's no other example, because I'm already feeling like I am torturing you guys. So, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any other questions. Make sure to watch this video. It's pointless for me to say this at the end of the video. If you watch it thus far, whatever. I'll see you in another video. Thanks for watching.